So it's another box of orchids, Fred, but I couldn't resist. I know I promised there would be no more until after the summer at least, but Lucke finally got their shipment in from Brazil, so there are a few things in there which I thought I better be quick, else they'll be gone. So yeah, that's the way it goes, isn't it? And here they are. Let's open it up and take a look. So there they are, labels on the outside, little free fertilizer, and it looks like some pretty good sized plants, doesn't it? Let's jump straight into it. These are the two which I really wanted to get while they were still available, and one of them is Cattleya gigas, which is also known as Varshavicii. That's the correct name, in fact. Semi-alba. Very rare to see the semi-albas of Varshavicii available, so I had to snap that one up. And also a semi-alba of Cattleya violacea. So I do already have a cerulean form of this one, which is doing quite well. Let's open them up and have a look. So this is the Cattleya Varshavicii semi-alba. It's a little seedling, juvenile plant, I suppose, a little bit bigger than a seedling perhaps. Yeah, so this is Brazilian import. Most likely the roots are all dead, so the first challenge is to get it going with the roots. Hopefully this will be the right time of year for it to put out some new roots. That can be a bit of a challenge sometimes. Alright, and this is the Cattleya violacea semi-alba estriata. Yeah, it's still a pretty small plant. I think this one was listed as flowering size, but I'd say maybe not yet, maybe in a year or two. But yeah, it's a pretty good size, and actually I've already got a couple of each of these different colour forms, so let's put them side by side and have a look just to compare. Alright, so what we're looking at here is three Cattleya violaceas. The one in the middle there is the one just arrived from Lucke with the Brazilian import semi-alba, and I've potted that up now into a smaller pot. The one on the left is cerulean, which I've had for about 4 years. It was a little seedling, and it's grown pretty well. You can have a look at the root growth on that. It's doing okay. The only thing, I guess, last year it grew these two canes and the leaves weren't as big as the years before, so that was a shame, I suppose. But and it hasn't come into growth yet this year, so we'll have to wait and see the coming month or so what happens. But these are violaceas, are warm growing Cattleyas, lowland tropical Cattleyas, so they need to be kept a bit warmer than most other Cattleyas, which I do try to do. And this third one was also a Cattleya violacea from last year, but it got attacked by mealybugs, I think it was, and it lost its new growth, and this growth here is all shriveled up, so I think this one's not going to make it, unfortunately, because it was doing really well for a while. Yeah, sometimes that happens. So interesting to compare the leaf color and the leaf shape of these two violaceas. The one that I've had for some time is a much lighter leaves with a sort of more elongated type of shape, a bit more rounded, and these ones on the left here, it's more pointed leaf. So yeah, like I said, I just repotted this, and what I do is lately is just put a couple of pebbles on top just to hold the potting mix down. Instead of staking it, just kind of try to keep it firmly in place, weigh it down a little bit. So that's the idea there. And violacea is also a species that not only likes to be warmer than average for Cattleya, but also wetter. So apparently they don't need to dry out as much, and yeah, they like a lot of light as well, so very bright. Being lowland tropical, if they get the full sun, they can take a lot of light. So what we're looking at now is the Cattleya varshavicii, or Cattleya gigas as it was labelled, and I've got a larger plant here which also is Cattleya varshavicii. This one here, this little one, is the new one, a semi-albiform. This one next to it here is a cerulean, which I've had for I think 2 or 3 years. And this one behind is a special clone from Eros orchids in Hawaii. I've had that for a couple of years as well. But so you can see, this is how big I need to get to flowering size, and this plant has flowered for me once about 7 years ago, and I've never been able to flower it again since. So obviously not doing something right somewhere, and varshavicii is known to be a little bit finicky. It's the largest flowering of the Cattleya species, from Peru I think it is, or is it Colombia? But actually I looked it up this week, and it's coming from elevation 5 to 1500 meters in Colombia, I think it was. And it's regarded as cool to warm growing, so that means that it can actually take a bit cooler conditions in winter. But you see a lot of people saying that it's warm growing as well, so apparently there's more different ways of growing them, or perhaps there are specific clones that prefer specific treatments. I don't know, but what I do know is that the one time this plant flowered, it had a fairly cool winter, and back then I was growing a bit cooler, so the greenhouse, especially in winter, was a bit cooler, and this was the only Cattleya that I had which was doing okay. And now it's one of the Cattleyas that's kind of struggles a little bit. But yeah, I think this winter I'm going to try growing it cooler again. People also say don't give it any water in spring until the new shoots are 6 inches high or something. Well, I tried that and I didn't get any shoot coming out at all on this one, so somehow that didn't work. So I think I'm going to go back something like what I was doing before. But what I was doing before was quite different. The conditions, it was much more humid in the greenhouse, although it's pretty humid in here today. It's just generally humid in the summer here in the Netherlands. But yeah, I did have a lot wetter conditions, growing conditions, and it was actually growing with its roots outside of the pot, and it had quite an extensive root system, just aerial roots, and it seemed to like to grow that way. But that's not very handy in a way, so I do now try to get them growing into the pot. And if we have a look at this one, which I've had for a couple of years, so it's got some pretty good roots in there, and it's a pretty vigorous plant, but sometimes it just doesn't look that happy, and then all of a sudden it's happy again. So it's sort of like the syncing of the seasons is not quite right. And this one, yeah, can I get this one out? Yeah. It's a bit of a challenge to do it all with one hand, but I got it out, and look, this has got good roots, great root system. I think it's pretty vigorous, but it has had this darker colouring on the leaves, which could be cold damage, it could be a virus, I'm not sure. It's always been a bit suspect, this plant. It's from Orchids and More, and I've always thought it's a little bit suspect, but it is actually, if you look at the roots on it, it's doing quite well. This one seems to be the easiest growing of the ones that I've had so far, and this new growth here is coming along pretty well. But is it going to be bigger than last year's growth? Not sure. I think it might end up being about the same size or a little bit smaller. That's my feeling, but you really just have to wait and see. Alright, so this next one is a Masdevallia hybrid. See the name there? I'm not going to say it because it's too much of a mouthful. But yeah, it's a nice little Masdevallia hybrid, very colourful, beautiful plants. I always struggle to grow them a bit, so I'll be interested to see how this one goes. I have got a couple out there out in the garden at the moment, so I'll probably put this one out into the garden as well, together with the other ones. Right, so this next one is something a bit different for me, and as you can see, it's a pretty big plant. I was hoping it might be a smaller one, but so this is a zygopetalum, a hybrid Trist by Arthur Alle. Yeah, so I had hoped that this might be a little bit smaller, but this is going to be a big plant. Well, they can be really beautiful plants with the indigo blue lip and beautiful fragrance. So that's what I'm hoping eventually to get going here. Yeah, so I'm going to have to figure out what to do with it. These are more intermediate growing plants, so do quite well, I think, in household conditions, also out in the garden in summer. I've seen zygopetalum in the wild in Bolivia many years ago, and ever since then I've always wanted one, but I think I had one once and it didn't do very well for me, so I'll be interested to see how we go with it this time. So next one is another dendrobium, densiflorum. So I recently got another one from Schroeter that was amabile, I think it was, a bit of a more substantial plant than this one, but they're very similar, very closely related. And that one I got from Schroeter has so far done absolutely nothing. So I don't know why I then proceed to buy another very similar plant, but I guess it's just hope. I'm just hoping to be able to grow these densiflorum style dendrobiums, because they really are spectacular when in bloom. I think more intermediate growing, a bit cooler in the winter, good light levels, very good light levels. Supposedly they're not that difficult to grow, but yeah, I've never had any real success with them, but I'm definitely willing to give it another go, so we'll see how it goes. Alright, and the last plant that we've got here is Dendrobium spectabile, and this is a bit of a monster. This is still a small plant, of course, but they do grow pretty big. I think up to about 4 feet high, 3 to 4 feet high, so around a meter 20 high. These ones come from Papua New Guinea, north of Australia, very tropical but very mountainous. But these ones are fairly low level in the mountains, so they're not growing up high, so these are pretty warm growers. And this section of Dendrobium which they belong to is known as the Laturia dendrobians, which are only found in Papua New Guinea, to my knowledge. Very distinctive and really fascinating flowers on this plant. I've always wanted one, but I've never really dared to try it, but I thought, well, you only live once, so let's make some room and get hold of it, because this is a really good sized plant. I'm really happy with this. It's even got a little growth on it there. Quite interesting that you have to get the plant from New Guinea, from Europe via Brazil, but here it is. It's a good sized plant, and yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how it goes. So here you can see the newly purchased Dendrobium densiflorum on the left, with the recently purchased Dendrobium amabile on the right from Schroeter. You can see that the amabile is a bigger plant. It's very similar looking plants, closely related to each other. So this is Vanda Plumpit Blue, Vandicostylis Plumpit Blue, in full bloom now, with a second spike on the way. Beautiful fragrance on this, and beautiful deep indigo colour. Very nice. And it's enjoying it in the glass vase culture. Absolutely loving it.